Hi, welcome to the Nobodies Project Season 2. This is a podcast where I interview creatives about how they're creative and their struggles, their accomplishments, the things they get inspired by, and just, things that they're passionate about. In this episode, Season 2, Episode 4, we talk to Candace. She's what you would label as an influencer, but we talk way more about what that means and kind of the stigma around it, as well as all the other crazy stuff that she's been doing, including photography, traveling, and, how to be an influencer. This is the Nobodies Project, and this episode we have Candace, what's your Instagram tag? It's Hey Candace?
Yeah.
Nice. Look at me doing my research.
I know. It's really winning on the first.
The first question I always ask is, what do you do for art or creativity? And then what do you do for money? Sometimes it's the same thing. Sometimes it's different.
For me, it is the same thing.
Nice.
I do digital content creation, and a lot of my work is focused in the wellness realm, wellness and self-care.
Nice.
Yeah.
No, I love that. So I'm just going to ask, do you like being called an influencer, or how would you want people addressing what you do creatively?
Yeah, I don't mind the term influencer, but I do feel like it has a lot of negative connotations. So I guess I don't mind being called it. I think I just wish it felt more positive when people thought of the word influencer,
Definitely.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things, the reasons that, we've worked with you when we worked together at Nike and stuff, but the main reason we wanted you on, and not just because aesthetically all your stuff looks beautiful. The positivity that you have, especially with your community, even on Sundays, it's what win did we have, or weekly win, stuff like that. It seems like you're very engaged, and it's all very, very positive, and not only showing obviously you show the incredible fun things, but also show more of the vulnerable things. Is that just who you are, how you have always been, or was there a process to get to that point?
I think there's an element of that that's just a part of me, and a part that I wanted to bring to the digital space. I think the conversation around social media and mental health tends to move toward it's negative for your mental health. And I think I wanted to be responsible for a piece of the internet that felt more positive and ask people to look inward and to take care of themselves, whatever that looks like for them, and give approachable and accessible tips and content that speaks to that.
Yeah. Nice. Was it always something that you did, or because a lot of people who will come up doing social media, it's showing off the best things, and then that's kind of what they're known for. And then some of them are kind of afraid to show who they truly are, in the sense of showing the vulnerable side. Mm-hmm. Did you go through a period of losing followers or anything like that when you started being way more personal, or were you always that way and that's how you cultivated?
I think it was actually the opposite. So when I started social media, I started out in photography.
Okay.
So right out of the gate in 2014, when I graduated high school, I was super into digital photography, and I actually used to shoot concerts, shows, indie bands and stuff. Yeah. I feel like I've lived many different lives in the social media sphere. But yeah, I was doing portraits and concert photography, music artists. And then when I started posting more about myself and my personal life, the person behind the camera, is when I feel like I gained more of an audience. People were more interested in what I did outside of photography work. So I decided to share that a little bit more, and people really liked it. So I was like, okay, let's do this.
How does that feel to basically... So, for example, I work at a brewery, and I go into work and I, make content for the brewery, what they want to make. How is it being the way you make money is being you? How does that fuck with your mental?
It's kind of a trip, not gonna lie. I feel like finding the balance is the hardest part, and figuring out, I don't want to share my entire life, but the things I share...
What do you share? What don't you share?
Yeah, the things I share are part of my life. So I think I just share what I'm most comfortable sharing. And sometimes that's really positive stuff. Sometimes that's not positive stuff. I think I just try to share what I feel like can be relatable to people, but also give that balance of my life is not perfect. I try to look on the bright side of things as much as possible, but stuff creeps in that isn't always positive, and that's okay too.
Well,
and this is how I'm dealing with it. Yeah, totally.
So going into some of the stuff that's not not as positive and stuff. How do you deal with, especially with how social media works, where posting often helps the algorithm, everything like that. When you go through a creative rut, and again, you kind of have to be you, how do you get out of it? What's like your worst rut you've ever been in? Are you currently in a rut?
It's so fun. I feel like I'm in a rut like every other week. And that's just part of being a creative, right? Yeah. Where you're just like, I feel like I'm on a high some weeks, and then other weeks I'm like, I should just quit. This isn't good. Everyone hates me. I think it's just part of the ebb and flow, to be honest. Like sometimes you just like are in it and then you're out of it. I think I try to look to other creators that I know and admire and respect for support or for inspiration sometimes. Other times I just take a break and I'm like, I'm just going to like kind of be online, kind of live my life. I'll take content in between and maybe things come out of that feel inspiring. It just sort of depends, to be honest.
I mean, the interesting thing is almost every one of the questions I ask you, it's going to be, well, it's a balance. But,
totally.
But it's real.
But it is a balance.
Yeah, it is a balance. Going into, you said some of the other creators, it's interesting because I think we're in a similar age where it's like we didn't grow up with influencers, like celebrities, I guess. So I usually ask like, who are your inspirations or how did you get started? I did want to dive into more of like your photography background and stuff because I'm always curious when I see your photos, even if it's just a story post, I'm like, is that a real camera? Was it well edited? Like, I'm always interested in, like, if you're just doing run and gun with your phone or if you're doing it with your camera. I'd love, like, how you got into, like, actually making content, whether that be, photography or whatever it is, or inspirations of how you got to where you're at.
Yeah. So I got into it because I was a Tumblr fiend back in like 2012.
Of course.
And I was really inspired by those images. And I was like, how do I create that? And I had zero photography experience, but my dad shot film. And so I grew up he's one of those people that just like, that seems interesting. I'm just going to build out myself. So he like built out an entire dark room like in our old house. Dang. And I grew up with him, like watching him develop photos and like shooting all this film photography. He mostly did landscape. So when I took an interest in photo, he was obviously stoked.
Yeah.
And he shot some digital, so he taught me how to shoot in manual and like what full frame meant, that sort of thing. And then it was sort of up to me to just learn the rest. Like I didn't know like anything about like filters or presets or Lightroom. Yeah. And so that part was just self-taught. I really like music, so I somehow got involved with like a local radio station, 94.7, and like I think I just cold emailed their marketing person and was like, hey, can I like shoot photos of your shows? And they were like, sure.
Yeah.
So I just started shooting.
I always wondered how to do that, and then every time I look up on Reddit, it's like, yeah, you just email everybody. Yeah. And most times they're like, it's free. We're not going to pay you, and you're like, great.
Yeah. You're like great. I'm super down. Just want the experience. So yeah, I think I cold emailed, got to do a couple of shows. They liked the photos. I started getting better. I upgraded my gear. I shot more concerts. I was shooting some festivals, and then just connecting with photographers along the way.
Yeah.
And eventually that led to me pitching myself to like a local cafe, T-bar.
Sure.
And I had zero food or drink photography experience, but she took a chance on me and was like, okay, yeah, let's just see how you do. And
nice, there's some trust.
Yeah, it did.
I'm sure you had zero imposter syndrome either.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like,
I
got this.
Confident.
To be fair,
you're like,
now
YouTube is great. Like, don't worry. Okay.
Well, I feel like now I have more imposter syndrome than I did then looking back, because I was fully just like, oh yeah, like this will be fun and I can do this.
Like almost naive about it.
Well, there was also way less pressure back then for like Instagram to do well and post to perform. Like people were just kind of throwing pasta to the wall and seeing what stuck. Like brands didn't have like as much of a curated presence back in like 2016 as they do now. So I think for like a small business to be like, someone wants to come in and take photos, like sure. Yeah. So she hired me and I learned so much. I learned how to like build a brand presence through social media, and basically everything that I learned from that experience I applied to my own, and that's sort of how I started building my own brand.
Awesome. Yeah. I love how it's like, okay, I'm going to let corporates pay me for a while to do it, and then I'll just do it myself.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, going off of that, something that's always interesting, and it's tough because like I do freelance and stuff, is pricing. So as an influencer, how is that conversation about like posting on your stuff. How did you, I mean, I'm sure when you first started, you were charging way too little, of course.
Yeah.
How is that almost mentally being like, I value my work in that way, be it just posting on social media, or maybe it's still content creation, like purely video or, you know, photos and stuff. I know you work with a lot of brands. Mm-hmm. How does that like, that balance of like charging a lot, but also like, oh, I get to do cool stuff?
Yeah, so
it's still work at the end of the day.
For photography work, it was a lot harder because
really?
Well, for me, I was doing that thing where it's like you charge a little. Like I think I charged like $25 an hour when I first started, which is so embarrassing.
And you're
to
like,
think back.
That's like $10 more than I've ever made an hour. Holy shit!
But
I'm rich. Yeah.
At that point, I was like 18 and living with my parents, so $25 an hour
is a lot. Yeah.
To me was like fair, and I had like little to no experience. So to be honest, it probably was fair for where I was at.
Okay.
Obviously, as I grew and my experience got better, I started charging a lot more. But with influencer stuff, I actually have a manager who helps me with that. So that is like so nice because she has to deal with all the wheeling and dealing, and I sit back and just
like
wait for the creative brief, and then I like film my stuff and I like send it to her and we're good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, that is that must. But getting to that, it was you probably had to do it all yourself at one point.
Oh yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
That conversation, I always feel weird about like putting a $ like on my creative stuff, and I feel like especially with maybe how, like you said, how some people view influencer and stuff, like people don't value it as much in that way. Or there's definitely people who are like, I can't believe you charge money to post on your story.
I know.
And it's like, you know how you paid money for ads? You're doing the same thing.
Same thing. Plus, like, I mean, you are also, as the influencer, the entire creative agency. Like, you know, I have my manager, but that's like one other person that's in my corner. And, you know, you're doing everything from accounting to equipment to lighting to modeling to everything that an agency would do plus.
Yeah.
So I think it's
and
silly.
You're the talent.
Yeah, and you're the talent. Yeah. And you're, you know, posting it and doing the promotion for it. So you're also like the billboard in a sense. So you play a lot of roles. So I think it's a little, that's what I mean when I'm like, I wish influencer had like a slightly more positive connotation.
Yeah, like a solo agency, something like that.
Yeah, I love that. We'll work on the keywords.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of work. And so I feel like the rate has to be comparable to that to some degree.
Right. Because if you went out and got a photographer and a model and a, you know, producer and all that stuff, it costs so much to do it.
Yeah.
But you talked about how you do pretty much everything in there. Is there any one thing that like you like the best? Like, is it the photography stuff, or do you just like producing stuff, like doing the full scale of it? Like, do you have one specific area that you like the most or dislike the most about it all? Probably the accounting part.
The accounting part is the worst. And I'm
Taxes
so
is
terrible
probably a
at
nightmare.
it. I have an accountant and I have a financial advisor and a financial lawyer, and I feel so stupid whenever I email them. I'm like, I'm so sorry for this question, but
this is why I pay you.
Yeah, exactly. The accounting is not fun. I feel like the positives ebb and flow. Right now, I still love creating video. Like, I'm so into it.
Yeah.
Anytime I get like a proposal and it's for a reel, I'm stoked because I just love the idea of just, I don't know, it just brings everything to life more than a photo would to
100%.
me. So yeah, video.
Video?
That's what I like right now.
Yeah, I've also noticed that you've also done some more YouTube stuff recently.
Attempted.
I was going to ask, how is the
let's
difference?
Not plug the YouTube channel, but like I'm attempting to get back into it.
Okay, I was going to say, what's the biggest difference between Instagram and YouTube and growing those audiences? Because I feel like YouTube is a much different beast.
Totally.
And within the last like 2 years got into YouTube and realized like, oh, it's like a streaming service. Like it's like a whole thing that people do huge productions for. That I didn't even realize was going on. And it's free. Yeah. And it's amazing. So.
Yeah, YouTube is like a whole other beast, whole different community type. But the thing I love about YouTube is I feel like long form video is still welcome there.
Yeah.
And I love that. Like
I mostly watch 18 to like 12 to 18 minutes. And it's like, I never thought I'd be doing that.
Yeah. The idea of like storytelling to me is so much more appealing through a YouTube landscape because it's, you know, it can be like 20 minutes and people aren't like, oh my God. Like if you were to upload a 20-minute video to Instagram, people are scrolling away.
Like,
they are yawning.
Podcast?
Exactly.
Like, what is happening here?
Yeah, they don't want it. So I guess that's what is still drawing me to YouTube in a way, but it's a whole other beast.
Yeah. Talking about storytelling, like, do you have, like, what would be like a dream project? Do you have any ambition to like make something bigger than like, not as if I'm not trying to diminish Instagram, but like make like a documentary, something in those areas, like any big projects that you'd love to do?
That's interesting. I don't consider myself like a filmmaker per se, so the idea of a documentary is so scary to me. But I do love being in front of the camera, being a personality. So something like acting, I think would be really fun.
Have you done any?
A little bit, but you know, there's room to grow. My first ever acting debut was with the Missoula Children's Theater, and I was like a turtle in The Tortoise and the Hare, and I had like one line, but I feel like I kind of killed it. Yeah. So you know, it just stemmed from there.
It's basically why you have the following now. You know, everybody from there was like, we got to see where she goes.
I know they, you know, just remembered from back then. Yeah.
In terms of like inspiration, was there any creators that you like really got inspired by, wanting to make content similar to, or is it just, this is just what I like to do? No,
totally. So speaking of YouTube, I was like really big into YouTube like 2012 to like 2014, 16. And that was like most of the content I was consuming was through YouTube. And there were some like beauty bloggers or fashion girlies that I really loved. And then I think I like found the body positive movement like kind of through YouTube leading into Instagram too. And so there were so many Black women that I was like really inspired by, because I had never seen that many Black women like growing up in Oregon that were like doing these creative endeavors and like styling things, and that were so approachable and open in telling their stories. So that to me was so inspiring.
Of course.
And I just wanted to do like the same thing basically.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's sick. I think that's like, I mean, that's one of the biggest things about YouTube and Instagram is that you realize there are people doing, like, everybody's trying to do something in that sense where like you can kind of find anything you're looking for. I feel like YouTube, especially some of the niche stuff that's in there, is like insane. Yeah. But like giving a voice to everybody, and YouTube, anybody can upload to YouTube.
No,
and that's
seriously.
Like some of the coolest things is you can totally see some creators that had no ambition of being a big creator start becoming a big creator just because they can find that audience. I also want to talk about your like sense of community with your followers. How do you view that relationship? As like, sometimes people can have a really, really big following and not really connect with their audience as much because they want to keep it very, very separate. You seem to interweave it a bit.
Yeah.
What's that relationship like with the following that you have?
It's honestly like my favorite part of being an online person or like sharing my life online, is that I feel like there's such a sense of community, camaraderie. There's a mutual respect. I don't really ever feel like there's been a time when someone in my community has like overstepped a boundary without being like respectful about it afterward. I think people that follow me just sort of like get me and can relate to me in some way. So yeah, I love like answering DMs, answering comments, like putting CTAs in my captions so that my community can like discuss with me or with each other, doing win of the week where I just encourage people to share small pieces of their week where they felt powerful or like it was a win for them or something. It's the best part to me.
Yeah. Again, something I noticed about your following is like how connected and community driven it is.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to be said about, I mean, I'm sure you get nasty comments every so often here and there from just random people if like a reel blows up, but like you've definitely cultivated a following that's like, if you don't like me as me, I don't care if you don't follow me.
Yeah, fully.
So a question I tend to always ask people is, would you take 1 million followers today or your current following that you have now? Granted, people could unfollow you tomorrow as well.
Oh, I would take my current following 100%.
That's what I figured.
I always summer of 2020, I feel like my page sort of blew up. A lot of people were like encouraging people to follow Black creators and stuff. Right. And I'm super appreciative of that. But I always told my friends, like, I was like, if I hit 10K, like, I'll be super stoked. Yeah. So the fact that I'm at 30K is really flattering. But I'm like, I'm more about quality over quantity, if that makes sense. And like, obviously, as my following grows, that opens the door for brands to like be able to give more in terms of sponsorships, and then I can do cooler shit. But no, I would totally. I could not grow and be fine. Don't tell my manager I said that, because she'll be like, "Why are you saying that?" But yeah, no, I'm 36 is great. Like, I'm fine with that.
To piggyback off that, how is like the pressure to grow your audience and do it that way while still being yourself? Like, I'm sure there's opportunities of like, oh, I'll hop on a trend or do something like that. But I don't really see you doing anything too like TikTok-y grabby like that.
No.
So where does that balance of like, oh, it's kind of my job to grow this, but I don't know, like, where's that balance come?
I try not to let the pressure get to me too much, because I think if I did, I would probably be in like a creative rut 24/7, and I would never get out of it. There is always going to be pressure to grow, especially as you see like certain people blow up out of nowhere that were at the same level that you were at. But I'm just sort of like, things that are meant for you are meant for you, and things that are not are not. And like, as long as I'm happy with where I'm at and my community's at, I don't really want to put that pressure on myself. In terms of like, like diving into TikTok trends, there's ones that are great, and there's ones that aren't for me. There's ones that creators do that work for them, and there are ones that wouldn't work for me if I tried, and people will be like, what is this? So I just try to stay like true to myself, I guess, and of course, you know, do what feels right most of the time. I don't know. Social's so crazy.
It's all a feelings thing too.
Yeah.
Like, you know when you're like shelling out and like doing everything like that. And I think it's like a feeling that most people have. Some people don't have it, and they just do whatever it takes to get money, and that's, you know, good for them.
And that's why people hate influencers.
And that's why they ruin your good name. Speaking about we talked about imposter syndrome a little bit. I found it really interesting that you said you feel more imposter syndrome now than back when you just started doing photography. Can you talk about that?
I just think the stakes feel higher now. Like, you know, I wasn't...
The pressure you're talking about.
Like, I wasn't creating content for, like, corporations or, like, giant brands in, like, 2014. And so I think I just had more freedom to play and mess up. And now there's a lot more structure, which... I mean, in some cases is good for me as a creator to, like, you know, stay on top of things, whatever. But yeah, I guess the landscape of social has changed so much so quickly that I think across the board, creators are just kind of like, where do I fit with this new wave of trends, content? You know, there are people who were like only posting photo who now all of a sudden feel really pressured to post video.
Well,
and don't want to.
Instagram was pretty much like, you make videos and you leave.
Or you're done. And so, I think it's just sort of like you try to keep your head on your shoulders and try to keep moving forward in a way that feels true to you as a creator. But there will always be that like underlying pressure of like, do this or you fail, or do this and you're not good enough. So, I think I just feel that more often than I did back then when the stakes were lower.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, there is way more pressure, but it's like, we're just, because I'm in the similar, like, just making content. It's like, but like, nobody really needs this content. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not making food. So I like to keep that perspective of like, it doesn't really matter and have fun with it, but it is so tough when there's a company that's like, breathing down your neck about how things should look. What was I going to ask? I'll think about it. But
it'll come back to you.
It'll come back to me. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll get another 20-25 minutes, and then we'll be good to go.
Cool.
Sweet. We were kind of talking about it during the break, but are there any companies that you would like dream to work for and make content for? And then I'd also want to hear about people who you've turned down, and like where your line stands for that. Because, you know, as a freelance, especially when I was first starting out, it was like, I'll say yes to anything because money. But I mean, obviously there's some moral, I hope. But I'm curious on who you've said no to, and then who your dream like collab would be, whether it be a company or even just another creator.
Totally. I feel like I say no much more than I say yes. A lot of times when you're an influencer, you get a lot of cold emails. Some of them are kind of like spammy and weird. Some of them just don't align at all. Sometimes the brand just like isn't a good fit. Sometimes the timeline is wrong.
Right.
So, I mean, in terms of like ones I've turned down, like I turned down a home goods company that wanted to pay me like $20K to do like a collaboration, but the timing was off and it also just didn't fit. It was like a gardening, like summer garden thing. And I like lived in an apartment. So I was like, this really isn't going to fit.
Dude, I like plants, but like,
well, they were like, build out a garden. And I was like, where do you want me to do that? Like, I live in an apartment. This is going to look so weird. So
apartment complexes. Just like, dude, we're stoked on this, but like, you're moving out.
Yeah. They're like, you're growing radishes in your kitchen. Like, we need you to leave. So yeah, ones where it's just like an obvious, like, this doesn't fit with me or my brand or the timeline, it's a no. In terms of dream partnerships, I'm so into like travel and like wellness stuff that an airline would be so rad. I did like a mini one that was like half a partnership with Alaska Airlines like 2 years ago, and that was amazing, and I would love to do something like that again.
Yeah, we were talking about it before. Some of the things you're going to be doing, but is travel? I have to assume the travel aspect of what you get to do has to be some of the most fun, and like where are some of the like the most fun places, maybe just to go, but also that made it easy to do your job, and like maybe a company took you there. Like, can you tell me about one of those like favorite projects?
So I would say in terms of like branded ones that I did a partnership with, the city of like SoCal flew us out and had us like basically just adventure around the city for 3 days. So we got to experience like the city part of it. They have wineries growing there. They have like a bustling downtown, amazing local businesses. And we just kind of got to show that off.
That seems super open-ended, which is probably your favorite ones.
And those are the ones that I feel like end up working out the best, when they're just sort of like, you are the creator, we completely trust your vision, stay within these sort of parameters, like don't do anything crazy, like running around naked in your video on our city streets. But other than that, like, you know, as long as you're not being vulgar, like we trust your vision, so go for it.
I have to assume that that goes in with when you talk about like brand values that you align with, is people just trusting you and not micromanaging and be like, this is exactly what we need.
100%.
But can you talk about some of the other, like you said, brand values, like what are the biggest things that you look out for a brand that you would work with or an influencer that you're going to collaborate with? Like where are your like guidelines for that?
Well, I definitely want a brand or a partner that makes sense with where my content is. So, like, again, there are ways that I could make gardening align with the content that I'm posting. But, like, as an example, that would be a bit of a stretch. Yeah. So I think if I'm having to do like mental gymnastics to figure out how I'm going to make a partnership work, it's probably not the partnership for me, no matter how big the check is. But yeah, I think in terms of also just like working with fellow influencers, like people who have similar values than me when it comes to like things like social justice or like body neutrality, body positivity, people who aren't going to say like vulgar racist things. Like, I feel like, you know, it's pretty easy going, but I think there are definitely like boundaries that I have and lines that I obviously won't cross when it comes to who I align myself with and what their values are.
For sure. And that seems like what people should do for everything on that. But
you would think.
But I like your explanation of basically it stems down to like, you know, almost instantly, like if you align or not. And then there are sometimes you're like, I could use that money, so how can I make it work? But yeah, I totally understand that.
Yeah.
What could you take me through a project where like you were really, really stoked about it and then it just didn't work out at all? And it was just like, you just can't even can't even watch it anymore or look at it?
There aren't many.
That's good.
I think there's never been one where I'm like, I hate this brand by the end of it or anything
Sure.
like that. But there's definitely ones where maybe it feels open-ended in the beginning. And then as you get to creating the content, turning it in, going through the motions of like posting, turning things in for approval, it starts to get micromanagey. And then it's like not very fun. Or maybe the brief isn't super clear, and then it's just not fun for anybody after that,
right.
when you've like shot this content that you're really proud of, and then they like cut out half of it or something, and you have to redo it or whatever. But it doesn't happen often, to be honest. I feel like my manager and I are really good at vetting up front because we don't want the headache down the line, and I still want to feel excited and authentic about posting something.
100%. Yeah, I knew you. So how we kind of met was through a photo shoot we did through Nike and stuff. And I knew you more as like a model on that end. How is that, like, talk about influencers get a bad rap. Like, then you're like, oh, so let's just throw a model.
Yeah.
Because it's like that also.
People take me
love
seriously.
That. Yeah.
Really, they do.
Yeah. How is that world and like the community around that? And same with influencer. Is it, I have to imagine you cultivated something positive, but with other creators and everything like that, what is that landscape like?
For modeling?
For modeling, yeah.
So I don't do modeling that often.
Okay.
I mostly just do it when it's like someone I know shoots a lot of like UGC content for brands or something and they need somebody. I've done some modeling for brands, but mostly it's like pretty local, which is great.
Awesome.
So a lot of times like the founders of the company are on set there, and you like get to connect with the people that are like really making the cool stuff happen, and sort of like networking on set and just making friends as you go. I like being just positive and warm on set. I feel like why wouldn't you?
Yeah, definitely got that from the photo shoot we were on together.
And it's just like fun to make friends and meet people who do a similar thing. I think like as a content creator, I've just sort of seen all sides, right? Like I've been in front of the camera, behind the camera, done the editing, done the mixing, done the video stuff. So I sort of know like how much effort it takes,
right,
and how much better it all goes when everyone is getting along and like isn't annoying on set. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like modeling, the perception of it, that's other people's problem, I guess. Like whatever they want to, label me or whoever like models or does influencer stuff. But yeah, for me, I'm just like kind of chilling.
I love that. That's a great attitude to have. You kind of talked about the camaraderie, and something I noticed in your content as well is that you have a couple very core people who are within like your little group.
Yeah.
How is that for accountability? I know me personally, I like to have Bradley actually is like somebody who pulled me into his artist accountability group, and it's really great to like have somebody be like, how is that project going? How is your accountability with yourself on making the creative stuff, and then extended like within your close community of I assume there are other creators as well.
Yeah. So it's really interesting having like a core group of friends that do the same thing that you do.
Right.
For me, there are so many benefits to it because, I mean, one, you just get to be able to bounce ideas off each other and just sort of connect on very mutual either grievances or like positive things that happen like throughout that creative process. And you can also like open up about things and people immediately get what you're talking about, right?
So was that those friends, were they friends that you made after you started doing more of the influencer type stuff, or were they friends and you guys, it was the journey you took together and you're both on the same route, or was it found later and then you kind of came together because you do the same thing?
I would say a mix of all of them. I'm trying to think like my core group of friends, like Laura, Maynard, March, Kennedy. We sort of met through Portland, but I wouldn't say we met through Instagram. We just also happened to be really interested in content creation and sort of learned that about each other as we went forward.
Oh, that's perfect.
Like Laura, I met at a random Le Labo event. And like I was taking photos at the event and she was there and had a great personality and we just vibed and we've just been friends for the last like 6 years now.
Nice.
So yeah, I think it's like a little of both, but I think we all probably still do this partially because we have people we can lean on that are in that same arena. And I think it's really nice, like when you get invited to go on a trip somewhere, or when you have a collaboration, or you are stuck when it comes to ideas, like you have, you know, we're all in a group chat. Like we just text the besties group chat and we're like, this is the tea, you know? I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like it wouldn't be impossible, but it would be a lot harder to do a lot of the things like documenting, going on trips and going to certain places with people who would like, or against doing all the social media stuff.
Even friends that don't do it. Even friends that are like, because I have great friends who are super supportive, maybe don't fully understand it, but are like, get it, girl. But if I were to be like, let's take a trip, and it's like this branded thing, and before you eat that, I have to take a photo of it, and before, you know, like there's little pockets within that where you're just kind of like, this is a little embarrassing when I'm thinking about doing this with somebody who doesn't do this 24/7. Like, I think it's nice when you're kind of with someone who completely gets it.
Yeah. How is that with like, I assume you keep some things much more separate, especially now, but how is that doing it with people? Maybe if it's your parents or something like that. Is it, like you said, it's kind of embarrassing in some right. Do you ever get embarrassed when you're like, oh, I have to go do this outside and blah, blah, blah? Or is it you've just been doing it, you know how to do it, it's completely fine by this point, and how'd you get there?
At this point, I'm probably like 80% of the way there. Like
80%?
I still think about it in the back of my mind. Like, here I am out here on the street with my tripod.
I thought you were going to say 100. I was like...
I'm not quite... Well, because I still think about it.
Okay,
like,
good.
I'm
so you
still
are
like...
Human. Good,
100%. Can you imagine if I was like, what are you looking at? Like, you know what I mean?
It's like, I deserve to be here.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I still think about it a little, because I know it's still strange. I think with TikTok, you know, people are sort of more used to seeing like young people out filming themselves doing whatever, and like businesses, I feel like kind of get it at this point, but it's still, you think about it. So it's still a little embarrassing, but I'm also like, at the end of the day, like, you're probably never going to see that person that you see on the street ever again. There have been times where I've been filming myself on the street with my tripod and someone has been like, are you Candace? And I'm like, this is my nightmare. Hi. You know, you're just like,
sounds like a fan.
Don't mind the tripod. Just filming myself. But for the most part, I'm like, I just have to get the job done. Like, it's fine.
Yeah. Something that's interesting about it is, so I usually ask if you got paid to do your art, would it make it better or worse? Obviously you do. So I'm going to ask the opposite. If you didn't get paid, would you still want to document your life in that way? Even without a community, nobody seeing it?
I think so. I think the community helps. Like, I feel like you feel more inspired and you have more energy to do it because you feel like it's like reaching people and maybe adding value in some way, right? Like, that I think is what keeps me going when I like get comments that are like, this really helped me, or, oh, I never thought of doing this, or this is such a great idea for this trip, I'm gonna like send this to my friend. That to me like really fills me up and makes me want to keep doing that. I think without the feedback, without anyone seeing it, I would still do it because I did that on YouTube back in the day. No one saw it, but I would probably not be able to do it.
We'll link everybody to those videos.
Great. Please do. But I just probably wouldn't be able to do it as often because I would have like a full-time job doing something else.
Right.
Like, it would be more of like a time management thing.
For sure. And then additionally, you talked about like the time to do it. Where do you find time to like record so much, or do you like batch it out and then you like go MIA, or do you just find yourself always on your phone? Just take me through like where you find time to basically work and do it that way. Like, it's creative stuff, so it's hard to just be like, all right, go be creative.
Exactly. So I feel like because of that, my creative process kind of ebbs and flows a little bit. Usually I'll get an idea for a video and then I'll like schedule out some time to make it and edit it and like, you know, get it drafted and posted eventually. And sometimes I can get a creative burst where I do that 5 times in a day, and sometimes I don't do it for a week and a half. It just sort of depends. Obviously, if it's like a sponsored thing or collaboration, there's more incentive to get it done quicker. There's a timeline and deadlines and stuff. But yeah, I think more often than not, I'm usually creating like 3 videos in a day, like once a week, and then I'll like kind of edit and schedule them out as the week goes.
I thought you were about to say like every day, and I was like, what? No, oh my god,
literally 15 videos a week. I'm just churning out content.
Yeah. Another interesting question would be, is what you're doing currently right now? I kind of asked it like before, but what you're doing right now, is this something that you'd want to be doing in 10 years, or is there an evolution to it, doing something different?
I think in 10 years, I enjoy social media. So I think depending on where the landscape goes, because it's changing so much, I would like to think I would be online doing something to some degree. I don't think in 10 years, because in 10 years I'll be 37, I don't think I would probably be online as often or in the same way, probably. So I don't know if I would be sharing my life to that degree, but my hope is that like I would still be involved in like a social media community of some kind, like talking to people, sharing some facets of my life, but who knows?
For those who've maybe never seen you or never like followed your account or anything like that, how would you describe like what content you make? Because we talked about like how you make it, but what actually it is.
My content's really like self-care, wellness focused. So I like to give people sort of like an approachable, like ideas, tips, that sort of thing in terms of self-care. And I sort of like to do it in sneaky ways where it's sort of like, you know, I think people think of self-care as like face masks and like bubble baths, and that's not what it is all the time.
It's like therapy.
Yeah, it's like therapy, like mental health work. It's like, you know, maybe it's like taking a solo trip where you're like trying to, I mean, it's kind of what I'm doing is like figuring out like, okay, you don't need somebody to be able to do the things that you want to do. You don't need to wait for anybody. You can make that happen on your own. Encouraging people to be strong enough to step outside of their comfort zones, that sort of thing. So I feel like lately my content is like travel focused just because that's like what I'm super into right now and it's what's filling me up. But it's just sort of like all within that realm, different things.
Yeah, it doesn't have a really specific, it's not like you're a food blog or anything like that.
And that's, I like really struggle with niching down because I'm just like, I want to do it all, you know? But I feel like algorithms love a good niche. So
I know.
Yeah.
you look at anything, you Google like how to like start blah, blah, and they're like, pick a niche, make it very specific and just dive in there. And it's like, but I'd like to do everything.
When you're a creative person, you don't want to just do one thing. You want to do so many things and connect with so many people and explore like different parts of life. And that's just like what I want to do. So I'm trying to niche down as generally as I can, but yeah.
Well, I mean, at the very least, the niche is like just you.
There we go. I like that.
Yeah. Cool. The last question I typically ask, and then I'll probably have another question after that because I lie on this sometimes about the last question, is what would you, like what milestone or career mark would you have to hit to say that like you've made it, or like what project that you've made? Maybe you're collaborating with, you know, a certain company that you've always dreamed of. Like where would you be? I've made it. I've done it.
That is such a good question.
Thank you.
Needed
that.
I feel like, you know, I talk with my manager all the time about goals and where we want to be in certain years. And like, I'm not really like a manifestation girly, but it's like kind of turning out to be that way. Like I'll write down goals and then we'll look back like the year before and we'll be like, oh my God, like I wrote down last year, I was like, I want to do a commercial. And I was like, I don't care if I'm in it for 5 seconds. I don't care if like I just get an inquiry about it and it doesn't happen. Like I just want to like start that process. And in like December of last year, I got an inquiry to do a commercial.
Nice. Oh yeah.
And then for this year, I was like, I really want to focus on travel. I would love to be able to work with a partner that wanted me to do like wellness focused travel content. And we had a call last week with a company and just signed a contract with a company that wants me to do that.
Nice.
So I'm like, I'm not a manifestation girl, but maybe I am. So yeah, I think if I were to be like, I made it, it would just be looking back and like noticing those points within my career that like the things I really wanted to do, I was able to achieve, or at least like started the process to achieve, if that makes sense. I feel like as a creative, do you ever feel like, I feel like there's never going to be a point where you're like, no, this is it. I did it. Goodbye. You know?
Oh my God. Because you asked me 3 years ago if I was like, man, if I could just like be making stuff for somebody and they're paying, like making a full-time living on just making stuff. Oh man, I'd make it. And then the posts always move because you're like, oh, well, once I get there, it's never enough. Like it's never enough. It's that, oh, it's evolved into something new and I want to do something different and new. But yeah, that question is totally a question that I had when I started doing this podcast like 2.5 years ago, where I was like, yeah, if you make it big, it's like I'm a YouTuber or something, like a successful YouTuber, but it always like changes and it's always fluctuating.
Yeah.
But one of the, like I said, I lied about that being the last question. I wanted to ask you about reflecting on your past content. Mm-hmm. I'm very envious of you when you're like, oh, look back and pretty much everything's flawless. It's
I don't know if I'd say flawless,
but
you said it, not me.
But look, do you ever go back through your old content and maybe even just when you were doing more photography and really look at your journey of like how much you've progressed? And do you do that often? And like, I really value it. I'm always interested if other people, because I know some people, once they're done with it, they can't watch it. They can't look at it. It's done. It's over. Or are you a more reflective?
I think I'm more reflective. I don't look back on it like every week or anything like that. But sometimes even if I'm in a creative rut, like I'll go back through my profile from like 2 years back and I feel like it just sort of like revives something in me where I'm like, I remember that post and like the passion that I felt when I was like sharing that. And that kind of like helps me get back into things. So yeah, I think reflection is good and it's healthy and it helps you like remember where you were and where you still want to be and maybe where you've evolved from. So yeah, I'm more reflective, I guess.
Nice. Yeah. Love that. Well, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Very excited. The last thing would be like anything you want to plug. I mean, obviously go follow Candace. Is there anything like where somebody can go support you, anything like that, that you just kind of want to generally plug?
Mostly just find me on Instagram and TikTok.
And the YouTube.
YouTube's coming along. My Instagram and TikTok is just at hey.candace if you want to find me there.
Perfect.
And
Cool. Well, thanks for being on.
Thank you.